The purpose of art is to wake us up, both for the artist and for the viewer, the person who experiences the art. I do this thing sometimes where I ask people to look at their hands. Just look at your hands like this. And what I like to do, I do this all the time actually. If people see me doing it in public, they think I'm really weird. But just look at your hands and say, I'm awake now. You can say it out loud. I'm awake now. Oh, that was nice. Let's go again. Ready? I'm awake now. Oh, yeah. I've always loved this Rockwell. It's that moment when you realize that everything changes forever. I mean, Rockwell was a master. He was the master of narrative and storytelling. And with this piece, when that moment that you discover that what you thought was real isn't real, there's some other reality. I try to do that in my paintings, to a greater or lesser degree. This is a Rothko. For me, it does that same thing. It sort of wakes us up. They're sort of, one might think of them as opposite ends of an extreme for what art is or what art can do. But when I look at this, when I stand in front of the real painting, the real Rothko, which we saw recently somewhere in our travels, Chicago, I think. No, DC. It just completely, it fills my soul and makes my heart sort of flutter. And I don't know what the feeling is, and I can't put words to it, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's waking me up. So whether it's figurative or whether it's narrative or whether it's abstract, the potential for art is to wake us up. And we all have different experiences. So a kid growing up in rural New York or Massachusetts or Georgia or Chadsford, Pennsylvania, is going to have a very different sensibility and worldview as they sit on the grass growing up and looking out at the grass in the late afternoon sunlight as the blades swing back and forth. They'll have a very different sensibility than a kid that grows up in the Bronx and experiences the graffiti on the side of the subway trains as it goes by. Neither is better than the other. They're both real. And what's important for the artist, regardless of their experience, is to be true to their temperament, to be true to their experience. Robertson Davies in the Cornish trilogy said, "Let your root feed your crown." I don't know what it means exactly, but I think what it means is let everything you come from, your DNA, your family ancestors, like a family tree, let everything from which you come flow up through your body like the roots feeding the tree and flower like the great crown of foliage that becomes what you show to the world. Let your root feed your crown. I think that's what artists are called to do. So we all have different experiences. Everybody's an individual, and we can all be true to our own experience and our own root by what we choose to show to the world. This is a self-portrait called A New Beginning. It's here in the show. And it's obviously very inspired by Rockwell. These are other influences as well. There's a Balthus on the top. And there's a This Is Not a Pipe by Magritte. And another Balthus, Vermeer, that's whom Rockwell would have been most influenced by, the self-portrait from behind at the easel. The Rockwell, and then A New Beginning. So I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. There wasn't much there when I was growing up. It was a very, very small town. And there was a little museum, but we didn't know much about art at all. I mean, I wanted to draw and paint, but I didn't have any way to know what that would look like. This is actually a Walker Evans photo taken over in Alabama, but this is what I remember my hometown looking like when I was a kid. Well, the only exposure to art I would have is if a magazine would come into the house. It could be a Saturday Evening Post with a Rockwell on the cover, or it could be a Life magazine, which might have Andrew Wyeth or Salvador Dali or Picasso, even the abstract expressionists. But they didn't have the deep resonance for me, and I didn't latch onto them the way I did to the more narrative illustrations. Was familiar with So the main artists I was familiar with was Rockwell and Wyeth growing up. This is Groundhog Day by Andrew Wyeth. It's a portrait of my parents that I did. This is my mother and my father. You can see how he's looking out. He's more outward. He's got a little flag on his lapel, and she's more inward. Her eyes are closed, and there's a dark door behind her. You can see the little place setting there was inspired by the Wyeth on the table. The actual chandelier was from the Undolfini wedding portrait by Van Eyck. The Freedom from Fear and Happy Birthday, Miss Jonesy. These are the kind of things I was exposed to as a kid. And that's so I thought that's what art was. I mean, that was my only way to know what art was. There's a painting, Estrelita, Bright Star, Little Star. My son Elliot holding up the star, the little angel. Inspired pretty directly by Miss Jonesy. Happy Birthday, Miss Jonesy. Another painting of Elliot on a school bus going off to school as a little boy. I grew up where football was like the religion. I mean, there was religion, there was real religion. We were Baptists, Southern Baptists, but the football was the other religion. And you'd go to the football games every Friday night, the high school football games, and the loud drums would go boom, 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 and you could just feel it in your chest for the marching bands. This is Vince Lombardi, I think. So I sort of turned football into a religion in this piece, with like a holy family. My son, my oldest son, Will, posed for it with his girlfriend Jackie. Did a full-length portrait painting of it with the bonfire. My sister was crowned homecoming queen when I was a little boy, so this is really an homage to her. This is my sister in the middle, having received the crown, and then all the losers of the court around her, looking rather disheveled and dejected. That would have been around 1990. When I was a little boy, I was in second grade. I wanted to show that because this is where I got the way that she was holding the flowers. I wanted to have her. That was Will posing as the football player, and then his girlfriend Jackie. And so I had Jackie hold the flowers the way that Jackie Kennedy held the flowers when she arrived at Rose Field in Dallas. And I was in second grade that day, and I remember Miss Hayes, my school teacher, coming into the class crying, and before they sent us all home. This is called Sightland. My father used to take me hunting when I was a kid, and this is a memory. I posed as my father, and I had one of my sons, Emmanuel, my middle son, pose as me. See, he's holding a stick. He's not really holding a gun, but he's out there sort of pretending to go hunting. There's actually the earmuffs on his ears start to look like little deer ears. He's sort of sympathizing so much with it, he's sort of becoming the creature. It's called Young Life. And again, it's like a holy family almost. It's like American Gothic, but with a dead deer. And again, the references are very much related to what was going on at that age in my life. So the way he's holding the gun is a very direct reference to the photo of Lee Harvey Oswald with the gun that he shot Kennedy with. Growing up, we'd watch, as I'd sit in the kitchen table, we'd watch the Vietnam War on the television with Walter Cronkite. And every day he would talk about the things that happened. So these things got deeply embedded in my psyche. This is a painting called Damascus Road, where very directly related to that famous photo of from Vietnam with a napalm bombing. And here I've got Paul, the conversion of Paul on Damascus Road with this kind of strange wrap across his chest. I was thinking about divine intervention and what we have control over and what we don't have control over. Columbus is not too far from Selma. It's across the state line. It was local news when the Selma boycott and all the things were happening in Selma, all the racial, the marches and everything was happening in Selma. So this was like local news for me. And you can see they're walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge here, and on the right you'll see the Martin Luther King the day he was shot. On the left is a scene from Selma on Bloody Sunday, and on the right was the day that Jack Ruby jumped in and shot Lee Harvey Oswald when they were transferring from the police station. So watched these live on television as a kid. This is called Madre del Nene, mother of the boy, or mother of the child.
Could you explain that picture, Bo? I saw it on the internet and I was fascinated by it. I mean, he's pointing, he's not holding a gun.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, thanks. I had read when I was young, when I was in high school, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I could do any number of things. I'd been raised in the Baptist church, and I thought, well, maybe I'd be a preacher or something like that. But there were way too many things I wanted to do, and I didn't want to build in being a hypocrite into one of those things. So I didn't want to be a preacher because it would have been sort of cool, but then I would have missed out on all those things I wanted to do, like be a human being. So I sort of was thinking that wouldn't work out. There weren't that many things I was good at. I thought maybe I'd be a clown. I started thinking, well, I could go to clown school and down in Ringling and be a clown or hobo. That'd be fun. And when I was in high school, my teachers were sort of seeing all this with concern. And one of them gave me, My Name is Asher Lev. Have you ever read that? Behind Potok? Amazing book. I read it when I was 18, my last year in high school, and it really affected me. And what Asher Lev does in the book is that he goes to Florence to study painting. I mean, that's what that's where he goes to study. So I read the book and I sort of follow his footsteps and go to study in Florence, straight out of high school. But this painting was inspired largely by in the book he does a painting called The Brooklyn Crucifixion. So at the time that I did this painting, in the early 90s, early 90s, I was trying to do my own version of the Brooklyn Crucifixion, because I just wanted to be able to visualize it and have some vision for it. And later I did other versions of it, but this was at that time. So, you've got this action happening on the middle of a midway, a median between directions. And so you're in the middle of the highway, seeing the scene. And on the left, it's very divided, it's bifurcated. On the left is this Pietà, more or less. It's a female Pietà, which in Asher Lev, that's what he did. He had his mother as the crucified figure. So I had a female crucifixion. And on the right is this patriarchy, this patriarchal man so it's sort of a left-right brain thing, sort of a release and a letting go, and there's a kind of control. So it's two sides of a way of being, just like the traffic. So it's sort of a vision of the brain, with the right-left brain, analytical and creative, less analytical. So, and then the little boy is the person who makes eye contact with the viewer, and that's my son Elliot. But there's a bridge between them, but you see the bridge is sort of under construction. So it's not really connecting the two sides. Does that help? They're open-ended. It's not a specific, literal, dogmatic kind of, meaning. A lot of things are going into it, and a lot of sources are being pulled into it, but they're open. It's not completed until you have some interpretation of it. And I hope that they operate on many different levels, so that it operate on just the visual level, where you look at it and say, oh, I can see that, I know what that is. And then it can operate on, an art historical level, and a religious level, and a scientific level, and a geopolitical level, and a psychological level. It has all these different levels that are existing all at the same time. And you can bring whatever level you want to, enter it wherever you want to.
Well, thank you for the insights. You're not just like Dylan or somebody. It's what you do. I never explain anything.
No, I'll try to explain it.
Appreciate it.
Detail.
But there's still enough vagaries there.
Yeah, hopefully. So this is Florence. This is where I went when I was 18. And when I got there, I studied with Ben Long, who's on the right there, and he was studying with Pietro Annigoni, who was the great Italian fresco painter. And he was studying with him when I arrived. I didn't have anyone to study with when I got there, but I saw some artists on the street, and every artist I would see, I would say, who's the best painter in Florence. And more than once, people said, oh, that would be Ben Long. And so I went and found him, and he was only 28 or something. He was only 10 years older than me. And he was American from North Carolina. So it worked out great. We were Southerners over there, speaking sort of Southern Italian, drawl, Italian with a drawl. Va bene, you know, that kind of thing. And so, but he was studying with Annigoni, who's a great painter, and he painted the great famous portrait of Queen Elizabeth. And the lineage goes all the way back to Michelangelo. Annigoni studied with Madame Simi, who studied with someone that went directly all the way back to Michelangelo. When I was starting to leave Florence, I'd been there for half a year, and it turned out that I had to go back to Georgia. I got some letters saying that my high school girlfriend was expecting, and so I thought, well, it's probably time for me to go back. It was one of those situations where I had some decisions to make in my life, and so I said, yes, let's come back, we'll get married, and we'll have a child. I was 18, and we'll move to Philadelphia. And because when I was leaving Florence, I got a short list of artists in America that were painting representationally, and it was a very short list. In 1974, there were not many realistic painters in America. Everyone was painting abstractly. So I got that list, and Nelson Shanks was on it, and Andrew Wyeth was on it. So I moved to Philadelphia, and when I got there, I started looking them up. I called Andrew Wyeth first. I actually called 411, and information gave me his phone number. And I said, hi, this is Bill Bartlett. I want to study with you. And he said, well, I don't take students, but you can come out tomorrow and visit. So I did. I borrowed someone's car and drove out to Chadds Ford, and I asked when I got there, where Andrew Wyeth's house was, and they directed me down to his house. And I got there, and Betsy Wyeth, his wife, opened the door. It was at the mill, this beautiful mill building. And she opens the door, and she says, well, he's not here. And I said, well, we had an appointment. And you have to remember, like, I had this real long hair and like a beard. It was the 70s. And I scared her. You know, she was really scared of me. And she said, he's not here, and I don't know where he is. So I was dejected, and I thought, well, I'll just won't study with him. And it turned out that, you know, she probably really didn't know where he was, because it was the 70s, and he was probably off painting Helga somewhere anyway. And so then I went and found Nelson Shanks. I called Nelson Shanks, who was painting portraits. You may know of Nelson because he painted the sort of infamous portrait of Bill Clinton that has the blue dress, the reflection of the blue dress on the wall that he mysteriously hid in the painting. But he also painted the Pope, Pope John, and he painted Lady Di and Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And so he was one of America's greatest portrait painters. He passed away last year, but I learned to paint, basically I learned to paint from him. I'd learned to draw from Ben Long, my teacher in Florence, but I didn't know how to translate it into painting. And I was I'd begun to attend the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, but I also wanted to really hone my skills, because a lot of the teachers there were encouraging us to just do whatever we wanted and paint abstractly. So I needed more skills, so that's when I began to study with Nelson. I wasn't familiar with Eakins until I got there, and this Thomas Eakins painting was around the block, and I would go study this painting, and this was how I really began to understand what painting was. The Gross Clinic by Eakins. One of my teachers at the Pennsylvania Academy was Ben Kamahira, and again, he had studied with Walter Stumpvig, who had studied with someone who had studied with Eakins. So there was a lineage there back to the French schools. But this was a painting that's in the Hirshhorn by my teacher, Ben Kamahira. And this is a Balthus painting. At the Pennsylvania Academy, they have a Crescent Traveling Scholarship. It's the highest award they give at the end of each year. So I won that my senior year, and I was able to go travel in Florence and all over Europe. And I saw this painting in Venice, because Balthus was having a retrospective show in 1980 at the Biennial. And it was the first Balthus painting I'd ever seen. It was extremely influential, because I hadn't found a way yet to make it feel at all contemporary or modern. Like, I had my chops down, and I could paint some, but I didn't know what to do with it or where to go with it. And Balthus suddenly started to show me that you could imbue it with a kind of mystery, and it could take you somewhere. It could lead somewhere. So when I came back from that trip, I started doing my own paintings. And this is one of the paintings that was influenced by that Balthus painting. It's called Assignation. And it was my young family, my wife, and Will, my first son, and Emmanuel, my second son. And it was influenced heavily also by Sargent, the Boyd Children, which is in Boston, which had been influenced by Velasquez, Las Meninas. There's a painting called The Eleanor Day, who was a friend of mine who I had posed in my new studio space down on Chestnut Street when I graduated from the academy. It was on the same block where Eakins had his studio. This is called Motet for the Day of Pentecost, which is in a collection in Boston. All Tomps. So I'd had a show at Marion Locke's Gallery, which was the best gallery in Philadelphia at the time, and I had that show 1 year out of school, which is sort of rare for a student 1 year out of school. And it sold out. It was extremely successful. And but Marion, the gallery owner, who I loved dearly, at the time she kept saying, just keep painting those paintings. Keep painting those paintings of the girls on the sofas and the nudes on sofas, she would call them, or nudes in chairs. And I was like, I'm sort of tired of that. Like I've done that. And I did all I wanted to do with that. So I began this other series, which at the time was sort of anti-commercial because they were so big. Most of them were 10 by 16 or 18 or 20 feet. They were so big I knew they wouldn't sell, which was good for me. I was doing portraits to survive anyway, so then when I started the Automp series, I was doing paintings just for the sake of making paintings. This one is called Tarmac, and it's life-size, so the fuselage of the plane is life-size. I was having dreams of a plane crash, and I wanted to exercise that dream and get it out of my system, so I finally just painted it. My brother was dying of cancer. That's him in the orange jumpsuit, so I put my brother in it. So in the Dallas accident, the Dallas plane crash happened while I was doing my studies for the painting. So I flew down to Dallas to see where that plane had crashed, so I set it in that actual location. The fuselage of that plane also had just been, that was all that remained. It was a DC-10? Who knows planes? DC-10, I think. This is my childhood home. It's like that test, that house tree person test, a psych test, where you have a kid draw his world, and you draw the house and a tree and a person, and how large the house is in relationship to the person, and how large all the family members are. Shows you like where they are psychologically in relationship to those family members. So this is my adult version of that. So I grew up during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this is a painting about that. It's called Fear of Division. When I was in second grade, I actually had fear of division, which was when the teacher, I could do math and I could do addition and even subtraction, but when she started doing division, it just threw me for a loop, and I started getting petit mal seizures, and I couldn't sit in the desk straight. It would throw me on the floor. Then I'd get to go down to the principal's office and not worry about it anymore and draw some pictures. So my brother, we had to wear dog tags because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they would teach us to get under the desk and hide under the desk so that in case they dropped the bomb, we'd be safer or something. I don't know. And we were supposed to jump in a ditch if we were out into the world. So my brother and I were out in the field below my house. It had always been a forest. It was so great. And then they started to tear the forest down, and these tractors were down there and turning it into a field. And they eventually built an A&P down there. But I'd never seen a jet stream before, but one day this commercial jet stream went across Alabama in the late afternoon, and my brother saw it, and we'd never seen one, so we didn't know what it was. So my brother told me that it was the bomb. And he said, hit the dirt, it's the end of the world. So I jump in the ditch and I'm lying there crying for 30 minutes, and he's yelling, hit the dirt, it's the end of the world. And I'm crying and crying. I had my oldest son, Will, and Emmanuel, my middle son, pose for us. This is Elliot, my youngest son. When I do something wrong when I was a kid, my mother would say, you wait till your dad gets home and he's going to spank you with his belt. And that if I'd done something really wrong, like that she was so mad she couldn't handle it, like the time I stole from my neighbor's yard to give to her. Because we couldn't steal, it's like in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. So she told me to go outside and pick a switch. So I'd have to go pick a switch, and I'd have to leave some little leaves on the end of it so that she could switch me hard, and it would like thwack me, like thwack. That was a bad day. But I figured, what we do is we like sort of carry all of our sins around with us all the time. So here's a whole red wagon full of switches. And he's got his little hand on his chest, and the day Elliot posed for this, he posed quite a bit, but one day he was posing outside for some photo references in the morning sunlight, and he put his little hand on his chest, and I said, "What is that? That's so beautiful." He said, "Oh, I have a little heartburn." And so I left his hand there, because I was going to have his hands down by his side, and I decided to call the painting Heartland. It's fire. Lamb. The Fool. The Magician. Did a whole series of tarot card characters. The Bride.
When did you paint that?
I'd been out in Chad's Ford when I painted this. So it would have been after 91, before 94 or 5.
And going back to that sort of mannequin fool painting you did of the fool, is that kind of resembled in the picture that you did in the other?
It is, yes. Good eye. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the little doll character down the bottom right.
Is that picture going to come up in here?
It will, yes.
Can you kind of explain me?
I'll try. Thanks, I'll try. This is The Bride, which I actually had a vision. I don't have many visions, I'm like a normal person, but one time I was lying in my bed, May 17th, 1993, and it was 12:34 at night, and I woke up from sleep, and I thought I heard something outside, so I looked out and I saw some car lights and stuff, so I go to the bathroom, I come back and they're gone, and I lie down on the bed, and I look up at the ceiling, and there's this light glowing in the ceiling. And it's a light that's just shining, and it's just vibrating. And I'm looking at it thinking, I don't know what that is exactly. And all of a sudden it started to give me information directly into my head. It wasn't using words. I know that's hard to understand. It wasn't using words. It was giving me information from light. It's really abstract, but stay with me. And what it said was, it said, this is the turning point of your life. It didn't say it in words. It said it in light. This is the turning point of your life. We're made up of two halves, a light upper half and a dark lower half. And your job is to let the battle rage between the two sides, the two halves of yourself. And I didn't believe it. I thought, well, that all sounds really, they weren't using words, but I didn't believe it. That sounds cool, and that sounds sort of logical in a strange kind of way. So I looked down, just to see if it was true, and there was this abyss that just went on forever. A dark gray giant abyss starting from about my belly button on down. So I thought, okay. It was terrifying, and I thought, okay, I got that. It said that energy flows away from us like water over a mountain. It was like rain coming down over a mountain, and then the seas rippling away from it. Energy flows away from us like water over a mountain. And it said that I might have to learn, it said that I would have to learn what it means to be open. And it said that I might have to lose my will. Now that was a terrifying thing to hear, because my oldest son was 18. My son's name was Will. So he was about to go off to Chicago to study at Steppenwolf Theater Company. And so I was terrified that was what was said. You may have to lose your will. So as and then it sort of started to fade away at that point. But I thought, how could I paint that? So this is my version of trying to paint that. There's this light upper half, this dark lower half. There's this window that's open, and there's this outside reality that's intruding out the window of the hill into the interior reality of the painting. And it's a painting pastiche of a Caravaggio painting of Abraham and Isaac. So Abraham's being stopped by the angel from sacrificing Isaac. So he's sort of given himself over to doing something that he thought he was supposed to do, but the angel says, no, it was just a test. So that's about losing your son, about losing your will. So the painting was a visual representation of that moment. It's called The Bride. And this is all some of the main characters I was doing of the tarot cards. The Fool, the self-portrait as the Fool, and the Bride, and the Magician, and the others. So in, I'd had a review in the New York Times. I started showing, not only did I show in Philadelphia, but I started showing in New York as well. And so I started showing in 1988 in New York. In 1991, I got a bad review in the New York Times, and that bad review sort of made me want to stop painting for a while. It was so bad. And so she actually, Roberta Smith, she actually said that my paintings were idiotic, which was not a very pleasant thing to hear, because what are you going to say? No, they're not? Like, I wrote a lot of long letters back to the editor and back to her, but I never sent them. And it's a harsh thing to happen to a young, sensitive person who's just trying to do their best at making paintings and putting them out there in the world. And so I retreated for a while at my gallery's suggestion, PPOW. They said, just take a little break. And so I decided I wanted to make films as well. So I'd been to film school. Went to film school in NYU, so I decided, well, maybe I'll start making my films now. So I started working on some. I couldn't really get the financing I wanted. And then all of a sudden, after this review happened, I got a call from Betsy Wyeth. And she invited me back out to Chadds Ford. It was 15 years after I'd originally gone. She said, I'd like for you to come out to Chadds Ford and meet us. So I go out, and they were the nicest people in the world. And she said, she was looking at my bio, and she said, I want to buy some of your paintings. So she bought paintings from me. And she said, I see here you went to film school. I said, yes. And she said, well, I want to make a film on Andy, a film on Andrew Wyeth. And so I said, well, I'll help you. And I'd never made a film before. I'd only made some student films. So for the next 5 years, I was out there, spending every day, all day with Andrew Wyeth. By the time it was over, I didn't want to make films anymore. I just wanted to paint because I was so inspired by Andy. But this was the painting I did at the end of that time of being at Chadds Ford. So this would have been about 94, 95. And it was called Painter's Crossing. So it's Andy in the middle with this jacket that he always liked to wear, this long, big fur coat, and Betsy on the right. And they're in front of Kerner's Hill, where Andy did all of his paintings. The great thing about Andrew was that he just painted in his own backyard. He didn't go to far-flung places or come up with subject matter that was unique or anything. He didn't even think of an idea before he started painting, actually. He would just go out and see something he liked and sit down and start painting it. He'd draw it first, and if he liked that, he'd start a watercolor. And if he liked the watercolor, and if that was going well, he thought, well, I'll start a tempera, and he'd start a tempera. And it was just because he liked what he was looking at. He was tapping into the moment every day. And the ideas would start to develop as he was doing the painting. Very different from the way I'd learned to paint, where you'd sort of have an idea and then figure out how to achieve the idea. His was he would just sit and be like a monk, like a Buddhist monk, just be in the moment. And then the painting would have just happened in the process. So, and this is Helga, his model, on the left. So it's all three of them. And the way that happened was I was going to do a portrait of Andy. He had agreed to let me do a portrait, so I'd been doing drawings of him, and we'd been drawing each other, actually. And then I said, it's time for me to start thinking about starting the painting. And so I was going to go out and take a couple of photographs of him on Kerner's Hill, where he did all of his paintings. This is where his father was killed by the train. You see that smoke over there to the right? That's right where the road crosses the train tracks. And that little tiny house back there in the back is Painter's Folly. That's where Howard Pyle lived. That was Howard Pyle's house. And then that smoke is from the train that killed NC. And so as I was doing these couple of photographs, on the way there, I realized my lens wasn't working. My camera lens was broken, so I had to stop at a camera store. And the only lens they had that would fit my camera was a lens that would go wide angle. I'd never had a wide angle before. So I show up and I start taking some pictures of Andy, and Helga's there. She goes everywhere with Andy. And so she's with him, and all of a sudden I do this wide angle, and all of a sudden Helga's in the frame. I start keep clicking pictures. Like, you have to realize at the time, like, no one had ever seen a picture of Andy and Helga together. And I was like, this is great, you know? And I went back and started thinking about it, and I told a friend of mine, I thought I was going to do the painting. And he said, well, you'll have to put Betsy in it too. You know, that you can't like just... And then once the idea was there was no turning back. And Andy knew I was doing the painting, Betsy didn't. So it was a fun day, the day that I introduced it to her. I had a little studio in Chad's Ford, and I had the painting on the wall, and they came in. And Andy had not seen it finished. And he started saying that his nose was too long. And he said, give me some paint, where's your yellow ochre? And he was like going around trying to find some paint. I mean, it was oil paint, he doesn't even paint in oil. And he was like getting my brush, and he started working on it, and he was like touching it. I was like, no! And I was like, yes, no. It's gonna be better, but no, it's my painting. And so I had to like get the brush from him and say, no, you just stand still, stand right there, I'll change the nose. And I'd intentionally made it longer because it was sort of Pinocchio, it was a little bit fun, like, you know, like maybe there was a little secret there. But he posed for it, and then I finished that little detail, and he said, now you can say it was painted from life. This is, yes? To the film? Oh, the film's out there. We're actually finally going to get it on, on pay-per-view, on Netflix and all of that. So soon. But it's been with a private distributor for many years, and mainly it was sold at the Farnsworth and the Brandywine. You can find it. It's called Snow Hill. I really like it. And Andy liked it too, which was a blessing. Marriage. It's a wedding, actually, and as you can see, the cake there is like a Tower of Babel. See, it's like what we have here is a failure to communicate. You especially can see it on the shadow. And you can see how she's sort of guiding the knife right down between the bride and the groom. It's a split. I like the way you see in this one here how he's looking off to the side. He's like distracted, but she's saying, no, honey, like pay attention. This is what we're doing. He's like, but. And she's like, no, this. And the detail of the champagne glass, half full, half empty. And the way that came about was I had painted the lips. I was working the lipstick of her face, and I painted the lips too red by accident one day. And I was like, oh, it's too red. And so I got my thumb, and I actually lifted it off of the lips. And I was like looking at it. It was like lips on my thumb. It's like, what am I going to do with this? And then I saw the champagne glass down there, and I just imprinted it right there on the edge. And then suddenly that little part of the painting had history. It was like they had drunk already. This is called the Good Old Days. Again, it's a kind of American Gothic. I had, when I was out at the Wyeths, near the end of my time there in the 95 or so, working on the film, I went up and spent some time with Betsy Wyeth on one of her islands, Allen Island and Benner Island. And Andy was having hip replacement, so there was, she didn't have an artist to boss around. I was on this island, Allen and Benner Island, because Andy was having a hip replacement, and they didn't have anyone to, Betsy Wyeth didn't have anyone to boss around. So she had me to boss around. So she was a great teacher. You could see why Andrew Wyeth was such a great painter, because she would say, work on it until it couldn't be better. It's a great way to make you strive. Work on it until it couldn't be better. So this was a painting I did called The Dowry, influenced by Andy's Young America and Wizard of Oz, Elmira Gulch. I love The Wizard of Oz. Grew up, it always just terrified me. Winslow Homer. This is my painting inspired by the Winslow Homer fog warning painting. It's called Lifeboat. Most of the paintings have a sort of joke title when I'm working on them. Not all of them, but many of them have a joke title. Like I have to have some just some laughter in my life. So this one was actually, the whole time I worked on it, I called it Midlife Boat. Because that's the way I was feeling. And that's what the paintings are about. The paintings are about like capturing a feeling of where I am at that moment in my life. That, more than anything else, it's about just a feeling of how it feels to be alive at that time. And that changes and it evolves. But this one is a midlife boat where he's working really hard and going over that wave. We're not even sure why. Maybe to save someone, but we don't see them. And there's sharks in the water, and you can see over that crest there's another one coming as soon as he gets over that one. And that's just the way it felt at that time. This would have been mid-90s. This is a recent painting. I wanted to show it just in relationship. This is actually in the show in New York. It's called The Promised Land. It was done last summer up in Maine. This is another painting I did when I first got out to the island out in Maine. What happened was I was on this island with Betsy one summer, and I was looking at all the islands. You could see just so many islands up in Maine, and so beautiful. It's off the coast. They were off the coast of Port Clyde. And I saw this island way out as far as you could see, past Monhegan, everything. And I said, "What's that way out there?" And she said, "Ooh, that's Matinicus. Never go there." The next day I got a lobster boat to take me out. If she didn't want me to go and they thought it wasn't civilized enough to go, that was the place I wanted to go. I wanted a place that they had never been, and I wanted a place that I could call my own. So I found this little island off the coast of Matinicus, a little tiny island called Wheaton Island. And I was able to buy it. And so I started to spend summers out there. And this is my friend David G. He was one of the rougher lobstermen out there, and his young wife, Tiffany. Steve Martin owns this. He bought this from a show in New York. It's out in Santa Barbara now. This is called Assumption. So it's sort of mother and child. This is the painting I did right after 9/11. I was working on the studies of this when 9/11 happened. I was up in Maine, and it was this, the day, do you remember the day? It was that crystal clear blue day, the most perfect day. And I was on the island alone with no way to see what was going on in the world. I had a radio, so I heard it, but I didn't have a way to really know the impact that it was having on everyone. But I did know what was going on. And what amazed me was how the sea just kept on doing what the sea does. Our world was shaken and rocked and would never be the same, but the sky was still crystal clear blue, and the earth was still spinning. Like nature was just doing what nature does. And we were having these human problems, but the overriding thing was that it just kept having this consistency. Like it didn't care. It didn't care. It kept on doing what it does. So this painting, Assumption, has got a sort of religious connotation. It's a little like the Assumption of the Virgin by Titian, which is in Venice. But I actually saw this scene. I was having this model, Sarah, pose for me with her little brother, actually, Navon, and they were going back to the other side, and the tide had gotten too high, so they had to get someone to lift them up in the boat. So I actually saw this happen right before my eyes. So I gotta paint that. The version of Jacob's Ladder. It's called Sleeper Awake. This is Ribera's Jacob's Dream. Saw this when I was in Europe when I was 18. Saw this painting in the Louvre of Le Ped Boite, the Clubfoot by Ribera. And when I saw Ribera paintings when I was young, I had never known of him. I didn't know anything of him. And when I saw those, it was around the time that I'd received a letter from my girlfriend saying that she was pregnant and that I'd have to make some decisions about what to do. So I sort of made this agreement. It wasn't really a deal with God, but it was sort of like some sort of agreement with the unknown forces of the universe that I would go back and accept that responsibility and be a father and have a family, but I wanted to be a great painter. I wanted to be a great painter like Ribera. And so when my son was born, I named him William Ribera Bartlett to always remind me. And this was the painting that I did of him up in Maine, carrying this bone, because we were walking around the island one day and this whale had washed up over these rocks. The stench was incredible. I mean, you just couldn't bear the stench. It was so bad. And it sounded like a helicopter because all the flies that were on it. It was like, it was like a living dead thing, and the blubber was up over its head. And so Will picked up this whale bone, and I said, "That's incredible, Will. I got to paint that." So we carried it back over the rocks, and he posed for me with it. But it's again, you can see that it's got a reference to the original painting. Just the way the foot is going on the clubfoot boy is very much reference to the way that I have Will hold his foot to remind me of this. And I want it to be a little bit like the cross we all bear. It's like we do what we have to do. And the bone has got this sort of strange sensuality and like this unknown thing coming from below. You can see the tip of the bone up here in the box painting. This was the first painting I did back in my studio in Pennsylvania after 9/11. I came off the island and I started this painting because they were opening this box of memorabilia, like their grandfather's memorabilia from the war. You can see the flag, "Don't Tread on Me," and the American flag from someone who had passed away, folded up in the triangle, and the colonel's cap. The bone. They're dressed up. They're two kids just playing dress up. You know, they're trying to dress up like adults. And she's actually wearing a cap from the Titanic, the Olympic actually, which was the sister ship of the Titanic that never went down. And over on the, you see a little, almost like a communion table over there with a little picture of a young couple, a marriage photo. And then bottom right, you'll see the fool. Popeye was always my sort of totem, I guess. I loved Popeye growing up. I'd always say, "I am what I am." It's like what God said in the burning bush, you know, "I am that I am."
And to note also, this is the painting that's from the show.
Yes, this is the painting that's in the show. So if there's any questions about it other than that those details, I'll be happy to answer. So that really was a way to try to process what was going on in the world, because I wanted it to be like opening up Pandora's box in a way. It's like we were opening this box that hasn't been open for a long time as we were starting to go back into war and talk of war and fear of wars after 9/11, as we were starting to invade countries. So I was like looking back on bringing back the past, but to this younger generation that were going to be saddled with it forever. So it was painted in 2001, just after 9/11. It's called Leviathan. And I got the idea after seeing the whale on the rocks. And again, it's a version of a Bible story. Because when I was a kid growing up in Georgia, I'd sit there in church and like draw on the bulletin as the preachers would preach. And so I would just draw what they were talking about. And so it wasn't uncommon to be drawing scenes like this. So as an adult, it was letting my root feed my crown, like illustrating these stories that had resonance from an early age. Leviathan. My son, Man, is posing as Jonah in the whale. And he's sort of like Schrodinger's cat. You're not sure if he's alive or dead yet because they've just been slit open. And he's wearing this you may have seen that wrap in some of the earlier paintings. And it's the wrap that Michelangelo had on all of his slave figures and his crucified figures. It's the same wrap, and it's sort of like a transgender kind of wrap of male and female. And so what I really was looking for was something that would combine the male and the female together. You've got the big phallus of the whale, and you've got the vulva of the whale opening up, and it's like a kind of birth that's happening. All we are is our parents, just the communion and the combination of the male and the female coming together. So it's a kind of birth with figures around witnessing it. You see here, one of the major references for it, one of the influences was Copley's Watson and the Shark. So you see the guy up top, especially the African-American figure, is echoed very much in the placement of my figure.
Any significance to the Virginia Cavalier logo on the t-shirt?
Yeah, it's a long story. My son Man was going off to college at that time, and he was looking at Virginia, and we found that, and I was like, that's perfect. I want it, because it made it feel contemporary a little bit. Because for a long time I didn't have that figure. I had, he was there. That figure changed more than anything. I had the big shape. But I didn't have that character looking away from us like that. But then when I did, I wanted him to have something contemporary. So this is the inability for one who's living to have understanding of one who's dead, or the inability of one who knows the exact title of this Damien Hirst piece?
It's at the Met, isn't it?
It's at the Met. It's something like the inability to conceive of what it means to be living in the mind of one who's dead, or something like that. So I thought about how to combine this with, I love the idea of the unconscious and the unseen forces. So I was thinking about and the idea of the deep and Moby Dick and that idea that's throughout our whole culture. So I combined that with Norman Rockwell's, is it The Connoisseur? Yeah. The Connoisseur. So I combined those together and I came up with this. It was a mashup of it's called The Unconscious. So you've got a self-portrait in a way. With I'm wearing my father's coat from World War II. That's his actual jacket, which is just like the sort of coming home painting of the coats in the Norman Rockwell over there, and intentionally influenced by it. And then you've got the shark up above. But if you realize, and I wanted to feel a little bit, he's wearing the beret, the self-portrait is the beret, but like the self-portrait of the Norman Rockwell over there. But also, I wanted to feel a little bit like The Truman Show, where something has happened and the reality's sort of been broken through and there's some control, but you're not sure how much control. So the main character is sort of watching over something in the deep. You'll notice that the big portal almost looks like a shark's mouth. Like you see some teeth up top in the ripples and the teeth down below and the stalagmite looking coral rising up. So it's like the whole thing is going to bite you. Like you're looking right into the shark's mouth. The unconscious. Your art goes as deep as your love goes. Wizard of Oz. Self-portrait in front of a tornado. The Parabolist. Mainly I love the title, The Parabolist. It's like sort of one who makes parables and one who speaks in a kind of parabola or in a kind of pretzel logic. I'm speaking in metaphor. Always felt a little bit like, you know how we all have favorite characters in like the Gilligan's Island, and we all have favorite characters that are like, oh, I associate with the professor, or I associate with Gilligan, or Marianne. So in The Wizard of Oz, it's sort of a similar thing, like who do you really associate with? It's one of those great things, it's sort of like the Beatles, like, you know, like who's your favorite? So, you know, I always loved the Scarecrow, if I only had a brain. Let's see, it must have been 2004. I went through my divorce and I moved to Seattle. Seattle's called the Emerald City. And I met Betsy, my wife Betsy Eby, who's a painter. And this is us traveling across the country. It's called The Good Traveler. And she's looking at the map and making sure we're going in the right direction. This happens all the time now, but with Siri or Waves. So this is our life. And this is another portrait of me as the Scarecrow and Betsy. Miraculous outcome. I actually saw this. I was traveling up California on the way to Seattle, and this car had just flipped over, and this young couple, like miraculously, was standing behind it hugging. Like moments after it happened, no cars had even stopped yet. They had somehow gotten out, and the car was flipped over. And I got a little piece of paper and just sketched it right then, as I was driving. And they were okay, so I didn't stop. But so it took me a year or two to figure out how to use that image and make sense out of it for myself. But it was me and Betsy hugging after this calamity. The Burning Broom. This is in Chad's Ford at the Brandywine. North Country. Sort of me as a self-portrait as a horse, and Betsy sort of taking control of the reins. They're leaving the fair. She's saying, you got to get out of this. It's like a circus down there.
You seem to have, a lot of your pictures both seem to have smoke.
Yeah, there's always some...
Like the previous one and the one before that.
Yeah, it's like fuzzy action at a distance. There's other dramas going on. I'm just showing you my little sliver of my drama right here. Like this is my reality and this is what I'm going through right now. But there's other dramas and they're all perfectly valid, but they're over the horizon and that's your drama or your drama. And they're all going on at the same time. When I was a little boy and when I was living in Georgia and my father would burn the field behind the house, he would say, we got to burn the field so the rats don't come up from the river. And he'd start it and it'd get out of control and then we'd have to call the fire department and everybody'd be beating it with shirts. And then... That was our little drama. This is called Blind Painter. And it's actually called A Glory of Painting. The working title was Blind Painter. I had a pituitary tumor and went blind in 2007. And Betsy and I had just gotten married. So it's me as a blind painter. We had this yard man when I was growing up named Roe, who I just loved. He just smelled so good. He was like pungent and black as coal. And he was like my father. My father was always gone off doing something. And so Roe was like my sort of surrogate father. But this is like a little Betsy handing him, the blind painter, the paint to paint with, the paint can, and directing him what to do. Open gate. It's that moment of decision that we're constantly in, every moment of our life. When you're talking about waking up and being present in the moment, this is what it's about. Because every moment we can decide whether to stay safe right here in this, our yard that our mother prunes the roses, everything's safe here, or the gate sometimes opens for us. It opens, the wind blows it open. And there's a road to cross and a field to get into. And we have to decide what to do. We're always right there, every moment. We are where we are because of the decisions that we've made. Radio flyer, sort of me as a father pulling a little Betsy aviator along over the hill. We're having a good time. A tender age. Another version of the horsey. But I'm like the father. My mother tells me, this is called allegiance. My mother tells me when she was a little girl growing up in Georgia, they had her pledge allegiance like this. Does anyone remember that? We pledged allegiance like this until around the early 40s when Hitler started to pledge like this. And then Americans started pledging like this. Because, so we started this. And then when Hitler took it up for the Nazis, we changed it to this. And she remembers, actually, she said you'd start like this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And then you would change it and put it over your heart. So she remembered the moment when it started to change. So I put him in this outfit. I put this little boy in this outfit, like an American flag waving, but it's really the color of the Holocaust, the prisoners in the Holocaust, the black and white prison garb that they wore. It's called blind. It's like blind allegiance. It's called allegiance. So, inspired by the difficulties of what patriotism means. America. Trophy day. When I was a kid growing up, you had to be good to win a trophy. You actually had to be one of the kids on the team that was good. I remember I was playing baseball for the Bears. At the Peach League, and I was there. I was just like this little mindless kid, and I was tiny, and all the other kids were good. And one day it was trophy day, and I show up, and they call MVP Ricky Strickland, and this tall guy, handsome guy, like this big, like we're all like the same age, but he's like that big, and he runs out there and gets his trophy and stands with Coach Money, and they stand there for some pictures, and the next thing I hear is Bo Bartlett, and I'm like, they're mistaken. Like, there's no way on earth I'm winning a trophy. And so I go out there and they hand me this trophy, and it's the Sportsmanship Award. And I'm just like standing there with a picture with Ricky Strickland and Coach Money, and I'm standing there with my little trophy. And I go over to the bench and I asked Coach Money, I said, why did you give me this? And he said, because you never complained when I wouldn't let you play. So this is a real scene. I actually saw this up in North Haven, where they have trophy day at the end of the summer. Kids that have done the best in sailing or whatever, golf or tennis, they all win trophies each year. And they recycle them. They don't let the kid keep it. At the end of the next season, that kid hands it back, and then they hand it back to someone else. This is one of the new paintings, so we're getting close to the end here. This is called Easter. And this was in my show in New York. It's an Easter egg hunt in the cemetery of the Confederate dead. And there's a real cemetery of the Confederate dead right near my studio in Georgia. And all the Confederate soldiers are buried there. It's Linwood Cemetery. And so I got the idea. This series that it began is called the Lacuna, which means the gap. So it's sort of the gap between religious traditions and the histories and the stories and the narratives that we always use to make morals out of, and sort of get our moral bearings, and then sort of the modern secular world, either historic events or literature from So most of them are mashups that are pretty clear mashups. So in here, the main story is the idea of the Confederate cemetery, where Senator Alfred Iverson is buried. That tomb back there on the right has his name on it. He's actually buried there. And he was the person that said, "We will rise again." That's the Southern battle cry, sort of after the war, like, "We will rise again." Okay, so I married that idea. And his son was General Alfred Iverson, who was this tall, debonair, very handsome alcoholic general who wasn't a very good general. And he would send the soldiers out to battle again and again, and they would lose. So his son was almost single-handedly responsible for the South losing the Civil War, because he would drink and then just send them out, say, "Get out there, you cowards." So he was in charge of Southern troops at Antietam, and he was in charge of Southern troops at Gettysburg. And then after that, Robert E. Lee just said, "Get back to Georgia and stay out of harm's way." And he was in charge of Southern troops when Sherman marched to the sea. So he was like just a total mess. Looked good, but a mess. And so his father, he's not buried there, but his father is buried there. So the senator said, "We will rise again." And that is mashed up with the religious story of Easter morning, where the girls are doing Easter egg hunt. It's sort of like the three women showing up at the tomb on Easter morning, because you see the tomb is opened over there. It's right to the right of Senator Iverson's marker. It's an opened door. And then you have this mysterious figure to the right of Jessie, who's my niece, who posed for it. And you see this mysterious figure, and it's like the morning they showed up at the garden, and they said, like, "Where has he gone?" And there's a mysterious figure answers. So it's this whole mashup of the Easter idea of resurrection, and then the Southern history idea of "we will rise again." So it's these two things that are still pretty much alive down there. I mean, it's an everyday part of it. This is self-portrait as General Alfred Iverson. This is my childhood home. Thanks. Another study in my backyard. And it doesn't look like that anymore. There's apartments and buildings and all sorts of stuff down there. But home. School of the Americas. Now, School of the Americas, in my home of Georgia, there's actually a school where they train, they basically train the Contras. They train revolutionaries in foreign countries at Fort Benning. And so I wanted to do some paintings that really represented my home, and I couldn't paint them without also representing the School of the Americas. My friend, Father Roy Bourgeois, was down in Central America when some of his friends, 4 nuns, were killed and slaughtered. And he was there. He just happened to go down to the market that morning. And he come back, and they were on the grass, slaughtered. So he asked around and said, "Who did this?" And he found out that some troops that had been trained at Fort Benning had done it. So he actually moved to the base at Fort Benning out in front. And he's lived there ever since, and he has protests there annually. The School of the Americas protests. And one of the things that they do there is the college girls from all around the country come down, Mount Holyoke and all of these places up in LaSalle and all these places in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and they all go down and they reenact the day of the massacre. It's to bring awareness to what goes on there. And this is School of Charm, also in my hometown, where I went when I was a little boy, Mabel Bailey's School of Charm. And they actually taught us how to walk and sit, and how to sit with a book on our heads, and all of our manners. So this is just another side of life. Betsy posed as Mabel Bailey, by the way, over there on the right. And that it really was across from the A&P that was built in the field when I was always so upset about, but that's where it really is, across the street from there. So this is where I spent many hours learning to be proper. This is my parents again. My father has passed away. My mom is 92. It's called Kingdom of Ends. My dad had promised me to take us to the World's Fair when I was young, the New York World's Fair, which was where this Unisphere appeared. And he didn't take us. So the rest of our life growing up, my brother and sister and everyone said, "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't make promises you can't keep." And we always hounded him and gave him a real hard time about it. He never said a word. I was having a show in New York a few years ago, and he was there. And after the show, I said, let's go to, get in the car, I want to take you somewhere. So we went out to Flushing Meadows. And I took him to the spot. And we were standing there, you know. He's old, I'm old. And I said, why didn't you take us to the World's Fair? Why didn't you do it? And he said, you know, I don't know. Probably I just couldn't afford it. I just thought, wow. Like all those years, you just kept taking that. You never made me feel insecure. You always just said, you know, like you just took it from us, every moment of us, like giving you a hard time. It was good parenting.
Is there a reason that you show us back and not the face sits?
There are reasons to see the portrait and reasons not to see the portrait. It's a way of presenting, you know, and I think Rockwell, I mean, you know, look at the kids looking at the moon, you know, I mean, Rockwell, well, Leyendecker a little bit, but I think, you know, it was a motif that he really developed and mastered. But I think it's a way of showing, it's what we're all doing when we look at a painting. The paintings are mostly life-size, so that's a big difference between these. My paintings are life-size. So when you're standing there looking at a painting, you're doing the same thing the person in the painting is doing. We're all just individuals looking through a pair of eyes. So we're all just looking at the painting. And that's what I'm showing it, but I'm also showing the person. So there's someone for you to connect with doing the same thing you're doing, really.
I'm so curious what the little boy is thinking. And it's like, I have to imagine. And I've noticed this in quite a few of your pictures, that one of the major subjects is always looking away. You don't really see their face.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder what they're thinking, or what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Just enough.
No, it's true. And that's, I mean, that's, you know, my motto basically is to start with a big simple idea, and to finish it to the tiniest detail. So I spent a long time developing the paintings. I mean, years before I actually start painting. And so I do sketches, and I do sketches until I figured out exactly what it's about. Enough for me to move forward and start it. And once I start, I do them in about a month or 6 weeks, even though really large ones. So, and then I finish them, I consider every inch of it. And I try to consider every interpretation of it along the way. That's what I do over those years of developing it, so that I'm not doing something that I'm not aware that I'm doing. Like I try to explain to my students, you know, you have to be aware of every possible interpretation of a painting. We can't, it's hard when you're doing representational painting because you have gender issues, you have racial issues, you have religious issues, all these issues that you don't have if you're just doing an abstract expressionist painting. These are things that are stumbling blocks, or things that make people react to it in a way that might make them say it's an idiotic painting. But you know, you try really hard to consider every interpretation along the way. So the motto was unity through understanding. I think that was the motto of that World's Fair. Unity through understanding. So the idea of the invisible world was that we could now communicate with people all over the world. Was it 64? Does anyone remember? So, and it's still there. And but it was a world that was transparent. We had transparency, and we could all relate and all connect with one another. And you know, whether it's I wanted to put it in a kind of dream ghost land. Like, is that a hope? Is that a vision that is impossible to realize? Unity through understanding, that we can actually connect and understand with one another. Connect with one another and understand one another. This is called the American. This painting's in the show. I think about a little like, I think a little bit about Norman Rockwell's The Problem We All Deal With. Is that it? The problem we all live with. You know, this is in a way my version of that, in a way. You know, I mean, that we still live with the problem that Rockwell was presenting, that problem we all deal with. But this is another problem that's ongoing, and how to deal with it. So I don't want to, I'm trying not to, what I try to do is to present an image. I just reread To Kill a Mockingbird, and Atticus goes out in the street and shoots the dog. And I'd never seen an image of it that really worked, like that really stuck in my mind. So I wanted to make my own image of it. So this is it. And once I got started, I started to think, well, wait a second, this is what we're all dealing with, really. Like, we've got this gun violence thing, whether it's, you know, from Sandy Hook to San Bernardino to Charleston, regardless of the circumstances around it or the reason for it, we've got a problem and we need to face it. And I think of it as like, back when cigarettes were a real problem, you know, it was a health issue. It wasn't a political issue. Like, you weren't like, I'm on this side and I feel this way, and I'm on that side and I feel that way. It was a health issue. Like, remember seat belts? Remember, like, he didn't say, well, I'm from a red state, I can't be for seat belts. It was like, no, it was like, you might not want to put them on because they're uncomfortable, but eventually you learn to put them on for everybody's safety, your safety and other people's safety. It's just a safety issue. It's like a health issue. And I think guns have gotten to that point, and we need to like try to figure out some way to resolve this, because it's not a political issue, it's a health issue. We need to figure this out. It's a bigger problem. And our hearts might change, but until we figure out how to get a handle on what's actually happening that's causing a lot of the larger problems, it won't change. It's called oligarchy. This is in the show in New York. I started the title was The Sadducees. It's one of the Lacuna paintings. The Sadducees was what in the Bible in the first centuries AD, BC and AD, the Sadducees and the Pharisees were in charge of everything. They were the ones that were in charge of the money, the politics. They dealt with Rome, the military. They were the religious leaders. And so now I was like, okay, well, what is equating with that now? Because it was something they were dealing. Jesus railed against it all the time. So what is equivalent to that now? So I started to think about it. I was like, well, in a way, it's like the corporate elite, it's the oligarchy, it's the 1%. And this is what we see, the struggles that are going on all the time now, whether that's Zuccotti Park and Occupy, or whether it's Ferguson, it's ongoing. So and that's where this is in the tradition of what Rockwell was doing when he painted the problem we all live with. It's within this same tradition. Mine is a sort of a picture of a protest. It's not a specific protest. You can't tell exactly what it is, where it's happening. But there's a figure up top, a patriarchal male white figure up top, that's being sort of unsettled and unstable. And the figures below are really, in a way, in control, but they don't really know that they're in control. They're not sure if they're going to say, long live the king, or off with his head. They're all sort of almost bickering in this direction and that direction amongst themselves, but something's going to happen. Halloween. My youngest son, Elliot, passed away 2 years ago, September 25th. 2014, and so this is a painting that's really trying to deal with that, process that event, where it's a little boy stopping in the middle of the road as life and all of his other colorful characters just keep on going for the treats in the next house, and he's just stopped. Time has stopped and just standing still as we make eye contact with him. He told me he came back. It's hard to deal with, but he came back to me, not in a dream. And I was lying there in bed crying one night. This wasn't too long ago, this past year. And I was lying there crying, and he came to me, and it's like he laid down on the pillow behind me. I actually felt someone lie in the bed. It sort of freaked me out, actually. But then the pillow, where my head was, sort of went down. It sort of, I could feel it impress. And I heard his voice very gently in my ear. He said, "I'm right here, Dad." And he said, "Don't you get it? Everybody is always everywhere." It's hard to say what that means. I don't know what it means, but he wouldn't have told me that if it weren't true. And it's made me feel a little more settled ever since he said it. So I'm living it. I'm living, understanding, trying to understand that and thinking about it all the time. Everybody is always everywhere. It makes my mind go a little expansive and ugh. It hurts almost. Like if my mind were a muscle, it would hurt to think it. It's always everywhere. This painting is about that. This is one of the Lacuna paintings. It's called The Samaritans. It comes from the story of the Good Samaritan, where we try to understand others and help others that are different from us, of different religions, and mashed up with Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, the modern secular existential crisis where there's nothing to believe in. So here, Estragon, who's the character sitting on the suitcase, has been beat up in the beginning of Act 1, in the beginning of Act 2 as well, in the play, Samuel Beckett's play, and there was no one there to save him. No one was there to help him get out of the ditch. And that's what the play happened. In the play, nothing happens. Godot never shows up. The only thing that basically happens was that he was beat up, and no one helped him. So I think of the Samaritans as an organization that helps people from having suicide, helps people with a hotline that helps them from suicide. What's going to help Estragon here is the arts. He's surrounded by the arts, the dancers, the creative ones, the circus performers. So the arts will save him. They'll get him through. They'll help him find meaning in life. The light years. Galilee. Triumph of romance. I'm going to finish now. These are the last few, because these are some of my favorite paintings. This is called Hiroshima. These are all really large paintings. They're going to be in Georgia, at the center in Georgia. There are about 3 or 4 of them. Hiroshima. I'd read John Hersey's Hiroshima. And in Hiroshima, there's a scene where a woman is standing there at a kitchen washing dishes. She's in downtown Hiroshima. And the mayor had set out a decree saying that you had to tear down your house so that if the Allied forces dropped a bomb, the whole city wouldn't burn. So she's watching her neighbor tear down the shingles off of his house one by one and throw them into the street. He's tearing his house down. Behind her on a cot are her 2 children, and they're sleeping. She sees a big flash in the sky, and the flash lights up the whole sky yellow. 20 minutes later, she wakes up and looks up, and everything is gone in all directions. The house, her children, her house, everything. She stands up and looks across the landscape. It's just cluttered. It's flat landscape. So, and when I did the painting, I wanted it to be that moment where she's hearing the Enola Gay. I put it outdoors because I didn't want to have it as an interior, and I put her listening. You could barely hear the Enola Gay coming in the distance, and I wanted to back it up in time. Like, just hold that moment forever, before the world changed forever. Homeland. This painting's in Chicago. And it's the characters that are all on this. They're all my friends. I had all my friends pose for it. And they're the figures from the village of St. Lo in World War II, where they had been invaded by the Nazis in France, and they had retreated out into the hinterlands. And then as the Allied troops came in and destroyed their village of St. Lo in order to liberate it, they were notified that they could come back to their home. So they're coming back, but their home is not what they thought it was. Their home's gone. One of the famous generals, I don't know if it was General Patton, but or Bradley, but one of the generals said, "We liberated the hell out of that place," because there was nothing left. They were all coming back. They don't know that yet. That's Elliot there. I've actually put him, that's me with a beret, and that's Elliot, like a little pink little shirt. And I put him in there twice. That's him in the t-shirt too, sort of waving the orange flag. This is called Goddess. It's maybe 14 feet by 20-something feet wide. And I had everybody I know come in and work on it. The whole bottom part was painted abstractly. All my friends and family would come over, and it took about a year. And they all painted the foreground, and everybody worked on it. And then I painted the big head. I wanted to feel like a great big mother head, like where when you're first born, you look up and you see this great feminine, and you just want to know what all this means and what all this is. I wanted to have that feeling when you stand in front of the painting, because it's so large. It's about the great mystery. I think we should try to paint larger than we can think. Paint larger than we can reach. The scale is important. This is God. This was actually the painting that Roberta Smith, when she gave me the bad review in the New York Times, this was the painting that she said was idiotic. It's a great mystery what all this is. I mean, think about it. I mean, we're sitting here like, we've got like bodily functions, you know? And we had lunch. We're full or not full, or starting to get hungry again. We're going to have to pee at some point. I'm going to sleep tonight. I'm going to talk to people and check our email and go on Facebook. But what is all this? I mean, I'm really serious. Like, what is this? Like, what are we doing? Joseph Campbell said the painters are the prophets. He said the artists are the prophets. So if the artists are the prophets, I think artists have to try a little bit harder to show the way, to show some light, shine some light on things. You know, like we've gotten into being, we're in a commercial system and we're all in galleries and we're all trying to make a living. Susie Goblick wrote a book called The Reenchantment of Art, and it was about what she felt like art could become. The book was written back in the 90s, and it was that art can bring life. Art can transform lives. Art can actually transform us and transform other people's lives. You look at a great painting, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter if you're white or black. You look at a great painting, you see a great painting, and it moves people. They are moved to think about what they're doing here, what we're doing here. So if we can wake up just a little, and one of the things I like to do is to just look at my hand and remind myself, oh yeah, I'm awake. And be awake in this world, in this life, and live in such a way so that the energy that ripples away from us isn't causing more disturbance. Live in such a way so that it's calm. And and the energy that flows away from us toward others is calm. And we see someone that's different from us, we can meet them eye to eye and let them know that I'm just like you. I've got my story, my root's a little different than yours, but we're all in it together. And we can do this. And whatever it all means, let's just try to be human beings and open our hearts and be real with one another. Any questions? Yes.
Has Roberta Smith ever come around? Has she opened her heart?
I did have the opportunity to meet with Roberta Smith a couple of summers ago up in Maine. She was giving a lecture with Jerry Saltz, her husband. And afterwards, I actually raised my hand during the talk and asked the question, like, did you ever think about like that what you say actually influenced artists' lives? And she said, no, we don't have that much power. And she sort of waved me off and like basically told me to sit down. So I did. I thought, And so, but afterwards, I was having a beer with a friend over at the bar next door, and I was telling her the story about how I'd gotten this horrible review, and like I asked the question for a real reason, because my career like really struggled after that. Like I did. I mean, I wound up meeting the Wyeth, and my life went on its way because I was, lucky. But my career path was going like this. I had reviews and I had articles coming out and all these things. And then when she said that review in the New York Times, which everybody believes what they read in the New York Times, all that stuff fell away. So I knew that it affects lives and career. My friend that Betsy and I were drinking with, she said, now that you've told me that, you should go talk to her. Like you should go definitely talk to her about it. So they were having a little meet and greet, which we had avoided. But I decided to go back, and everybody had left except for Roberta and her husband Jerry, but Jerry was talking to someone. But I was one-on-one with Roberta, and I reminded her of the review, and it seemed like she didn't even remember the review. She said like, oh, idiotic, that's a horrible thing to say. So I think we've come a little bit to terms with it. We have come to terms with it a little bit, but we'll wait to see when if she reviews my show in New York. I'm petrified.
They say things happen for a reason. If that didn't happen, you wouldn't have had that wonderful time at the Wyeth.
That's totally true. That's totally true. Yeah. It's a funny person to quote, but Art Linkletter said, he said, things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out.
Whoa.
So when I was a kid, and I'd get in trouble. Not only would I get a spanking, but as I got to be a teenager, my dad would make me read Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. And so that would be my punishment. And so I slowly got a little bit ingrained with that, like you can, if you think you can push through. And it just became a part of my way of being, and, through my parenting, my parents. But, as you decide, what I was talking about with Open Gate, the painting Open Gate, we decided every moment what's going to happen. Every single moment is an opportunity. And we can either be passive in a negative way or passive in a good way, or we can take action. And the hard part is knowing when to take action and when to take action about what. We're constantly, the present is this like arrow point where we're on it, and the future of all possibilities are out there in front of us, and all the things that have happened before in the past. And we make the decision about what's going to happen. We do. We're human beings, and we're making this happen. It's not like we're in this great mesh of stuff. Like, we have to all take some responsibility and take action for what is. So, it's a responsibility to be here, and a responsibility for us we can make things better in the way we want them. It's not about kind of like wishy-washy New Age manifestation. It's about take some responsibility and say, well, that's a good idea and that's not a good idea. Not out of ego, but like what's good for the whole system. What's good for the whole system. And every act we take. Like if we're driving down the street and throw trash out the car window because we don't want to take it home and put it in the trash can. If everybody on the street did that, we wouldn't be able to drive. Every action we take, whether it's the kind of car we drive, whether it's, what we eat, every action we take affects the whole system. And even minuscule little actions, they all affect the whole system. And we do act collectively, the whole thing starts to be different. And I think that a lot of the struggles that are going on right now, as we began, like having a moment of silence because of the violence, if we look one-on-one with people, eye to eye with people, we're in charge of this. We can make it better. And we better get to work making it better. That's all I got.